day of EPIQ for the year with our experiment with EPIQ Pathfinders. This morning, we're going to start with a talk by Amanda Rada and Tim Lockwood. They're going to be talking about teaching computer science. And so I am going to let them take it away.
And in true teacher fashion, neither of us have a lesson plan. So it'll be great.
Yeah, we're ready.
You want to go first?
Sure. I can talk about what I have to say. Won't take too long. I had the opportunity last year to work in 2 different classrooms and use some of the ideas of computer science. So I'm going to start with the more able group first. This would have been a group of 3 middle schoolers. It was an interesting beginning because when I got them last year, they did not know how to use a computer keyboard or a computer at all. They had been purely Braille based in a device called a Braille Note Touch Plus. And so it isn't like, first thing we did is we said, hey, let's learn about keyboarding. So we got them on computers. We found some really cool software that helped them learn it on an actual Windows or Mac computer. It was web-based. I really like it. If anybody wants to know more about that, I'll let you know. But what we ended up doing was having them go through the logic parts of it and writing code in a not in Quorum Studio or a text editor, but just writing it in their own editor, which was Microsoft Word, amazingly, is what the files would come out as. And they would we would teach them the same language that we use in Quorum, and they would write down the commands, hopefully in an appropriate order, and then they would find out, and it was for last year, it was all robot based. So they were writing commands to make the robot go look for things. It said, find something shiny. They would go out and find something shiny. Some of them got pretty sophisticated in their programs because they loved making the robot leave the room, go down the hall, and, make a lot of sound in the office or something. Those kind of things were great challenges for them, and it got them away from their things and chasing that robot around the school. So it got them some notice too. They improved as the year went along. I think this year we're going to go into more formal education. They now all have that basic background on keyboarding. They're just learning how to use a word processor. I think using things within Quorum Studio will be quite doable for them by the second quarter. Once we get them past, how do you open things? How is JAWS going to work? How is NVDA going to work? So we're going to be coming at it from that direction and doing that. I have a new student this year that already has the keyboarding experience, but specifically wants to learn to code. So we'll probably have 2 different streams going on there. The others are picking up the adaptive technology on the computer itself, and she will be using Quorum Studio to catch up with the skills that the other kids had with the robot. So that's kind of what my thoughts are going forward with this interesting group. The other group was much different. This was very severe and profound students, ranging in age from 7 to about 11, but all having a similar mental age of between 3 years and 12 months. So it was a very low-level group, but yet I was able to use my programming knowledge and putting things into the robot based on the input they would give me. The robot would do different things. And they got fascinated by the fact that they could push a button on the robot and it would do something. They just thought that was wonderful. And I was able to, at one point, which I can't do right now anymore, but I hope to get back to it maybe on a different robot system, is actually I was recording voices of people they knew. And if they pushed the button, the robot would do something and tell them what it was doing in that other person's voices. just using a WAV file. That system I was using broke down at some point, and it's just a matter of me getting that put back in there, because I know the program itself is quite capable of doing it. It's just my way of getting things into the card. It was kind of difficult. I think I have to get some new software to do that. We also just did some very simple things like, how do you follow directions? And how does a robot follow the directions? And how is that different than a human would? The classic peanut butter and jelly sandwich building experiment. Both the different groups had fun with that and enjoyed it. We never did get anything you could eat out of it, but we had fun. Anybody got questions for me on the kind of things that I've been doing?
Hey, Tim.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Daniel. Ask you a quick question here. With the students that you were working with in the first group, the the more high functioning group, were you teaching them Quorum at that point? And then the other question I do have is, what was the program that you were using? Because I have one student I'm going to be working with this year that doesn't really have, kind of has a little teeny bit of Braille skills and a little bit of iPad skills. And I'm trying to find an easy way to get her onto the computer. I mean, I know of, what was it? I think, was it Dolphin that has a program called Guard, I believe, that kind of, changes everything and makes it easy. You press 1 for the internet, 2 for the word processor, that type of thing. And I'm just kind of curious what you're using.
It's a web-based product called Typio, and it's all managed through the web. I'll send up the link to the company that has it. They do offer free samples for a while of it. Their tech support is wonderful once you purchase. And they were very willing to work with me as I was first learning their particular system. It is aimed pretty much at children, although I've found some ways to make it so my more adult age kids, we can make it appropriate for them as well. The company had some problems at first last year, but they worked them out.
I think I have heard of that. I think I've actually ran into that program. I think I know what you're talking about. I think I ran into that towards the end of the year, because I started looking ahead for next year's stuff. So with the higher functioning groups, were you teaching them Quorum then at that point?
We were working within the Quorum language, always in a strictly linear idea. They never got to the point where they were starting to have to worry about libraries. It was type the commands in the order you think they'll make the robot do something. And we just gradually increase their vocabulary. But I used the language of Quorum, so that, it was, you want to repeat, then you say repeat 6 times, and then do your activity you want it to do. And you always have to say when you're done with that repeat. So yeah, they were learning the language of Quorum without being in Quorum Studio, or actually, they're doing it in their own text editor. But it wouldn't be directly translatable because their typing is pretty crazy. It's kind of like mine.
Yeah, I know all about it. Thank you.
There's actually a lot of value in that in the computer science education community broadly, like outside of, anything that we're talking about here, just generally computer science education. Depending upon the age of the kids, there's a whole lot of initiatives where they just teach kids concepts, or where they just teach kids about, what looping is conceptually or stuff like that. So I want to give one example. In Nevada, I'm on a committee for the state governor's board here, and we changed, I think it was like 2019, 2020, something like that, the law in Nevada, so that computer science education is required for all kids. So through K through 12, like kindergarten through a senior in high school. And that immediately, if you wanted to inject a whole other discipline into it, just like having English or math, there's English, math, and computer science is all kind of part of what you learn as you're growing up. The question then becomes like, well, what do you teach at each stage? And like, you're not going to give a kindergartner, Quorum or any programming language right off the bat. It's just too hard, because they got to learn to type. They got to learn to like use the mouse or not. They got to learn how to, understand what's on the screen. And if they're screen reader user, there's all sorts of skills they got to learn too, just to kind of get their feet wet and do this stuff. If they have LD, there's all sorts of complexities. So it's interesting seeing what teachers do in practice, but there's a whole ton and value in like conceptual learning and unplugged learning and, you know, playing games with the kids that are, you know, just related to computer science topics. So I actually like hearing what Tim does, because like it makes me think of, you know, how do you manage it at each age level? Maybe that wasn't his intent, but that's what it makes me think of at least. So
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking through, and there is more and more available. You know, I can go out and get more ideas now. You know, for my lowest kids, I go, well, what are we supposed to teach a preschooler? What are we supposed to teach a kindergartner? And say, how much of that can I make real to them? That's always the issue. I can't. They're not able to do abstract reasoning, but they can be exposed to the concepts. We're going to build that underneath part for them so that there's something there for them to build on in the future.
Hey, Tim, are you able to use switches with Quorum?
Yeah.
So
I can route different. I've never had a reason to do it, but yeah, I'd have no trouble hooking up switches into my Mac or Windows system and having macros that do certain things so a kid could do things on the computer. We haven't got to that point yet. And the kids that I have are capable for that. I use switches, but not with the robot. We have other devices with the kids that we're activating via switches.
for switches, Gina, there are most switches send keyboard events, believe it or not. And
Yeah.
those keyboard events actually get routed to Quorum just like anything else. However, we learned last fall, there was a woman I know that she's a mathematician. She does proofs with her eyes through eye trackers, and really, really fascinating academic. And she had to self-wire a whole bunch of switches that she wrote herself and then wrote the hardware for, because, that's what you do, right? And when you have a disability that's not like one of the more common ones, you have to invent it yourself if you'd like to work. And that's sort of her reality. And it's really interesting. What we found was that in her case, she was using certain switches that were sending events that we could technically capture, but we didn't even know existed. Specifically, there's this subclass of joystick commands that are not actually used inside of systems, but that kind of get routed in a funny way. And so there are a couple kinds of switches that if they're routed just right, will not work in Quorum Studio. If you find one, you got to tell us, because we may not know it exists. So if you have one that is there, adding in the routing is usually like an hour of work. It's not very complicated. So just let us know and we might be able to test with it.
Oh, cool. I've got a couple of kids that were doing all sorts of things. So Dragon, naturally speaking, they have a little bit of motor control. So we had looked at, I think it's called joystick for iPad, but we're transitioned over to the laptop now. They're definitely capable of handling a laptop. We just have to figure out how we're going to do certain things.
Yeah, the person that I know also sent him through this subclass of joystick commands, which is apparently common in the motor impairment communities. So I forget where that is on our dev schedule, but we are planning on doing some work on that in the relatively future. One of the funny things is a lot of the commands that it gets sent back and forth, William can correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall they don't even really have good names. They're like command 75. And so we're like, yeah, well, who would need those? Why would we ever need to add support for command 75 or something like that? Am I remembering that wrong, William?
It turns out there's just a whole bunch of stuff on computers that someone somewhere didn't feel like naming someday. So, we all just get to try and figure out what that means in the future. So
that's what it was.
Try and name your variables in a way that makes sense, because other people will end up looking at them at some point, maybe.
Yeah, try resetting them too, because you have to, it's 3 times to the left, 2 up, 1 to the right. And if you miss it, you start all over again, or you get somewhere else. But okay, well, I will definitely tell the girls, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from them, Stefik.
Yeah, as always, I mean, you know how we are, like when people send us stuff, we do our best. We don't always have like a magic wand to fix stuff instantly, because that's, you know, that doesn't exist unless you're at Harry Potter land, but never mind that. Anyway, please go on.
And there's my link to the Praetorian USB switch out of England that is a nice USB dongle wireless switch, which they make in different colors and flavors. It also works with the beams, if you know the laser beam thing. That's really fun for some of my disabled kids to trigger events using that USB interface that's laser, you know, just have to interrupt 4 different lasers.
Very cool, Tim. So, anybody have any other questions for Tim's portion? And if you think of something, obviously just shout out. Not Adam. Who put it in there? Now I've forgotten. Andrew had put into Slack a link to a very basic robot. It's a bee-bot. It looks like a little bee. It's very similar, almost identical to the Code and Go mouse that I use in my classroom for a starter kit. And the Code and Go mouse is cheaper. So go with the cheaper one. It's a little purple or blue mouse that has front, back, left, right, go, and action on it. I've used that as a starter for multiply disabled 6th graders through college bound 12th graders. So it's a lot of fun. It comes with little tiles if you buy the right kit, that you set up little mazes, and it's got a magnet in the nose and a magnet and a piece of cheese. And when you get to the end and you hit the cheese, it makes a happy noise. The kids love it. It does make a happy noise anytime you touch that cheese to the nose of the mouse. So you might want to hide the cheese from the kids when they are not actively working on an assignment, or you will just start hearing happy robot noises in the back of the classroom. Not that that has ever happened in my room or anything like that. So that's one thing I start with in the classroom. Traditionally, I have taught, well, traditionally for 2 years, I've taught AP CSP using Quorum. And then I've also taught a class to our learning support, which is the name for our mostly self-contained middle school students. And that class uses a mix of pretty much anything I can get my hands on. We use the mouse until they get bored of it. We used this year, APH has a program called Codequest, which is very similar to code.org's starter lessons kind of a thing, where you've got the little maze to go through and you pick the blocks that it needs to go through, and it's all accessible. They also have, with that, the mazes they have in embossable, which is printing in Braille for those of you who don't do Braille much, formats. So you can just pull up the file, hit emboss, send it to the embosser, and then the student has a physical copy of the maze on the screen.
Hey, Amanda.
Yeah.
Quick question for the Codequest. Is it an online thing? Is it more of a tactual thing?
It is an iPad app.
Okay.
That is all voiceover accessible, or you can zoom in and all those kinds of things if you're low vision. And then they also have this Braille file that you can emboss the maps for.
Oh, okay, cool.
And physically, or walk your way through them. I used that with the class of 4 I had this year, and I only had in that class one student who is a tactile learner, and I love this child. Felt so bad for her. She hates technology, hates it. If it plugs in, if it has a battery, she doesn't want to touch it unless it's a grow light for a plant. Okay. If it had something to do with plants, she was okay with it. If it was anything else, no. And they put her in computer science. So she was okay with the mouse because that was a toy, right? Getting her to do Codequest was very difficult because she doesn't like technology. It's not the class she pays the most attention in, so she was significantly behind the other students in her basic kind of navigating an iPad skills. She can push the button and ask Siri a question, and that's about it for her. I'm sure she can do more. What she'll show us, that's about it for her. So when I gave her the physical maps of the Codequest and she could just trace out on the paper and tell the TA the buttons, she flew right through it. So that let her work on the logic skills the same as everybody else in the class and kind of circumvented the reluctance to touch the technology. Eventually I said, no more TA, you got to use the screen yourself. But
Amanda, is that map pretty equivalent to Swift Playground's Braille maps from San Francisco Lighthouse? So I'm kind of visualizing, columns and grid.
It is columns and grids. Yes, I actually haven't ever printed Swift Playground maps. We just started using that a little bit this year too in my world.
I can help with that. The Swift Playground maps our kids found them to be easier because it's thermoform. So
okay.
you have solid lines to work with. For Codequest, it is Braille. So a square with full cells creating the square threw off some of our Braille students. But we use Codequest in with our functional kids, including functional high school this year, and they really loved it. And the other option is that you can print out the 3D models of the characters. And pretty much what Amanda just said, we had kids who were kind of anti-tech, but they loved the Braille, even if they weren't a Braille kid, and they were using the characters to move around. And then even when they switched over to Swift Playgrounds, they were then using the 3D printed character to help them transition to, oh, now I have to think through my character's perspective of left and right, not me as the user looking at the screen. And that's a big deal for a lot of them. So they got to find out their frustration point with Swift Playgrounds, which is good because then I can go back and have a conversation with the math and science teachers and figure out where we want to go back and collaborate. And it was really eye-opening for the staff because anybody can do Codequest for sure. But it does introduce loops and everything. So you kind of see them hitting the brakes, but they realized all this value because, hey, there's all this math stuff in there with the grids and everything. And then the kid's like, what? I'm not doing math.
Yeah, you are.
So these printed mazes, do your bots run through the printed maze?
So
like the B-bot and so on?
About Codequest and Swift Playgrounds, it's not a robot that's running through it. It's either your finger or you can do a 3D printed item that you're walking through it to parallel blocks better than running a guy through a maze on the screen.
It's a tactile representation of what the environment looks like. So like with Swift Playground, you have different mazes and you have a character named Bot and he's got to move forward, turn left and pick up the gem. And you have different obstacles in the way that's printed out in Braille. So as you're tactually feeling, you can feel like an arrow pointing up and that's the starting point. And the very first one, you just kind of go up like say 3 blocks and you got move forward, collect gem. That's a simple command. And tactually, the student can kind of feel the Braille, see what's going on. The problem I have with some of my students is even I use different methods, put money, I would use marking dots, kind of what you guys talking about. But I still had students had a hard time translating that over to actually then doing the command on the iPad. Like, there was just, I'm not quite sure what the issue was for some of the students. They were great mobility wise. They could represent and tell me exactly it right. Okay, I do this in the Braille, but then when I had them do it on the iPad, it's like I couldn't get that to carry over in one or two of my students, and still a little baffled. I couldn't figure out quite where to go with that. I tried all kinds of different things, but kind of ran out of time when I worked with them a couple years ago.
It's a very interesting thing you say, because it's something I'm dealing with personally to a limited extent, which is what's the kind of command you have to run on the iPad?
Well,
It's usually move for so now if we're talking about very basic block language, it literally says move forward, turn right, move forward, turn left. That's
so you drag your finger across the screen?
Yeah, well, no, what you're doing is so basically you have an edit box. I mean, you can type in the command, you could actually type in the line of code, or you can swipe kind of in the bottom middle and you double tap on move forward, and it inserts it into the code. And there's a run button at the end, and you tap run, and the character makes noises, and it says bytes move forward, byte move forward, byte. Byte looks sad because he almost fell off the edge. Byte has collected gem. He's all happy. So you get a lot of feedbacks. A lot of students like it. But for whatever reason, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just the interface sometimes, because I don't know for Gina and Amanda, some of the problems I've had is like, when you get in that edit box, sometimes it bounces around and you got to swipe back, or try to get over there and find the double tap.
Can I give you a tip? And
Sure.
I am not a teacher, but random thing. Try giving them a keyboard just as an experiment.
I've done that. I've done Braille displays, Bluetooth keyboards. I've done it. I've done all three, and I can't really say. I don't know if Amanda and Gina, what y'all experience has been with that, but I know for me, it's been somewhat successful. I mean, I think it's just glitchiness, in the system, because sometimes at least my experience has been when I've used it, it'll bounce around. Like, in other words, the focus was on move forward, and then maybe you touch the screen again, the swipe right, all of a sudden it's bounced off of that, and it's now in another section. So you got to kind of get back and swipe back over there. And in that environment, it's hard because it splits the screen. So on the right side, you've got your table environment, or the world, or the maze. And on the kind of upper left side is kind of like the instructions. And then I guess what Gina's in kind of the bottom left is that little edit box, and kind of the bottom middle. Once you hit the edit box, it opens up the choices of moving forward, click the gem, go through a portal, close a portal.
I think a tip though, Pranav's on the right track. Keyboards made a big difference for my students that were struggling, whether they were like non-techie or lacking voiceover skills. The other thing though is students who try to go between keyboarding and voiceover skills tend to have more trouble because they lose where their focus is spatially as well. So like if you switch to Bluetooth keyboard, really try to stick to that. I do think Swift Playgrounds gets glitchy, and they've been doing some updates. Ironically, they were having a webinar, and I had asked for like a copy of the slide because they weren't recording things and all that, and they said they were not offering any accommodations. So I got into an email string with them, and I need to go back and follow up to them. But my reply was like, oh, I'm really surprised that you would not offer any accommodations, since Apple, as well as Google and Facebook, are always, focused on accessibility. And they backtracked really quickly. So I think it's just another one of those examples of so many people in the company and whatnot. But I need to go back there and bug them again. The tactile graphics are really good. And the other end of it, Daniel, was that when kids are going through hands-on with those tactile graphics and they have all the steps and it's a matter of entering it, that's an occasion where sometimes I'll put them with a partner, or I'll have them work with that tactile graphic and maybe have them type it out somewhere else like Google Docs, just to see if they can really get it and to kind of build their confidence. And sometimes they do a little bit better. So
yes,
we'll go over to Notepad or something to just let them still have the experience.
I agree. And I've done some of that towards the end. I did that too. And when I taught it, it was kind of towards the end of the last quarter. So, we didn't have a lot of time. It was like a 6-week type of thing. So it was more like an introductory thing. So it helped me kind of see some areas that worked, some things that didn't work. But I definitely agree with you. At the end, I ended up doing the keyboards because I was like, okay, the Braille displays didn't do bad, but I agree. I think the wireless keyboards ended up doing the best because then I could say, okay, just press your right arrow, do your up and down arrows to just double tap and so forth and so on. So it really would recommend that.
One other thing, and sorry if I'm asking something very basic. Did you give the kids a tactile layout of the app?
Of the app itself?
Yes.
I personally did not. Because one thing I would tell you is, when you're using the rotor on the iPad, it can give you a character description. It can also give kind of where things are located. So it'll say, column 1, row 1 is the gem, column 4, row 3 is the starting point. So I mean, it kind of gives you, it tells you like how many columns and rows there are. So that's when I would use the Braille, because when you have the Braille, it's an actual table of columns and rows. So it represents that. Really on the left side, it's just text. I mean, from, again, me not being able to see it. I don't know, Amanda, you might be able to reference that, or Eugenia more so. But I mean, I know it's, it's sort of helpful to a degree, but I mean, basically you just swipe in the top left, and as you keep swiping right, it reads down through the instructions. You'll get to the edit box and you double tap on that. It opens it up. Bottom middle, it opens up the choices that you can tap on, and then kind of swipe left or right to find the run button. You tap on the run button. So, but again, I would agree that using the keyboard more at the end was really the better choice I found.
Yeah, because the reason I was asking about this was, in India, I know that for a lot of adult learners, people found these tactile layouts of the screens handy to understand where what was placed. So I don't know if it maps back, and I don't know anything more about this, but yeah.
Well, it's more. I mean, I would agree to you maybe to a point. I just, for some reason, I'm not sure what, and kind of like to Gina's point, I kind of started to do that towards the end. It was like, okay, just tell me the steps. I'll do the steps. You tell me what they are. Okay, I got to move forward. I got to move forward, and but yet I would still have some students who would, like, even though there's water to their left, they're trying to turn left. I'm like, here, do you feel the water? Yeah, I feel it. I said, well, what do you think? Do you need to move forward or turn left? Oh no, I need to turn left. No, you can't. There's water there. Biter's gonna drown. You can't do that.
Yeah, that's where I think, like, acting things out. I haven't done a tactile graphic for what's on the screen for Swift Playgrounds. I did used to do that for sod beans with the Lego team, and especially for students who had deteriorating vision, it seemed to really help them conceptually. And I just did it with everybody all together. It was one of those moments where we had complete accessibility for visual and Braille sort of integrated together. So that could be another strategy to go back and revisit.
Yeah, I guess what you can maybe take a screenshot of it.
Yeah, it depends on the kid. And I mean, tons of materials to make on the fly tactile graphics. You can do something as basic as using a Draftsman, which is the foam with a plastic piece of paper, and you write on it, it becomes raised line, and you can just draw the outline of the screen real fast, and squiggle in text and make blocks for where the blocks will be, and that kind of thing. So kids can understand what the screen looks like. I haven't done that for my tactile users before for any app, except for when I have actually put an overlay onto their iPad for some reason. We've had a couple of different apps just in the math world that we've used where we've put an overlay on it so they can find like where the calculator button is a little easier and those kinds of things. Other than that, I've had success giving the kids 20, 30 minutes to play with moving around the screen and just learning it for themselves, because then they make their own connections of if they need to know that they've got to Some kids will swipe through everything on the screen, no matter what you tell them where things are.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to navigate. So let them do it. That's fine. Let them do it 30 times and then they'll know. I swiped 4 times, I found my button. Other kids like to drag their finger around the screen and hear things be announced. I let them do it. That way it's their preference, their learning style. And then if they've hit some kind of frustration, I give them an option or a suggestion or something like that. That's just how I've done it. So another thing that I've done in my classroom is the last 2 years, I've worked with the Northwest Earth and Space Science Pipeline, which I mentioned yesterday. And they are a group that is pushing science education for underrepresented students, basically. And many years ago, I got a notice saying free NASA workshop in Montana for the weekend. And I went, sure, let's go play. And they do work with NASA. All of their competitions are related to different NASA missions and the science behind those missions. Not the school year that just finished, but the year we don't mention, was a competition called Roads on Mars. So it was all about exploring Mars.
Yeah.
And you get an absolutely ginormous mat. So if you've ever done Lego competitions, the mat is at least twice as big. Okay.
Oh boy.
Yes, it takes my entire classroom floor. Okay. Or library floor. I love you, Mike.
Problem number one.
Mike has had to deal with the mat being on the back of the library floor for like an entire year. Yeah, they sent me 3. All right. I don't know what to do with them. They're just rolled up and in the library. So you get this map, and it just like if you've ever done First Lego League, there's little goals and missions to be done. The way they frame the mission is that you are the NASA scientist and you are completing that kind of mission. So your robot is the Mars rover, and you have to travel around and dodge the craters and go over the ramps to get into the canyons and whatever to collect samples. And that's the robotics part of that challenge, is collecting the samples. They also have a drone part to the challenge, where you have to fly a drone into a specific spot, land it, and then move on. They also have, in the last 2 years, they've had a Search for Life unit, where you learn about what exactly are they expecting to find in these dirt samples, or what are they looking for in these dirt samples. And our favorite activity has been going on the methane hunt around our school building to look for methane. And yes, they fart on the sensors. They do it. I have middle schoolers. It's what they did. One did not register. We were suspicious of that. And one student definitely registered. Joys of having middle school boys. This past year, they actually wrote out an entire curriculum at a middle school and a high school level that matched their expectations of missions to concrete lessons to teach. And what the students do, and I have our mission log, our mission development log, that I will get the right way here and put in Slack so that everyone can see it. We used our mission development log, which is the kids, like final project. We used Sway this year because I took way too many trainings in Microsoft last summer and fell in love with Sway. If you've never used Sway, it's very PowerPoint-esque, but it has integrated themes and backgrounds. So if you're visually impaired, you can click one and you know all of your colors will match, and it's way easier to use than going slide, 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 slide. So we have, this year was roads on asteroids. So we had these snowman craters on the asteroid that we had to go through. So our first screen is the name and an image of that crater. Then I have a chopped off picture of my 4 main students in masks in the hallway, and our team name was the WSSB Explorers. Our first mission was crater formation and evolution. So this year we discussed crater formation, and we have, I forgot to click sound. We've embedded a video here.
This is our WSSB Explorers video. We are throwing cork to make craters.
Okay, we have a pan of flour. This is my audio. Can everybody hear the audio of the video?
First crater, first asteroid.
Good.
And I'm
Flour is
describing the video.
flying both all directions, left, right, forward and back. Pick up our asteroid and throw it again. This one landed just below the first one, and when the flowers spread, it filled in the first crater about halfway. And then you can see a lot of spray from the flower flying and filling in the second crater.
We learned that if things hit near a crater, it will change the way the crater looks.
Okay. So that was when we did the video, just the 2 girls were there to finish the video for us. So they got to do the auditory there, and I did description of the video. And
what was the background noise? Sorry.
there was probably my cat walking around or something like that.
No, that spaceship like noise.
So
when you're talking about the crater to Mars.
So I had the video slowed down a lot, so it was just distorted background noise. And I'm a film editor. So if there's noise in the background, it stays, because I don't know how to clean that up.
But because it was singularly appropriate, I'm like, okay.
It was. But it was just it was just the distorted noise of the background. I filmed that in my living room with my phone and my camera on Zoom, because the kids were all virtual and nobody had flour at home because they are not high socioeconomical kids. So we all watched and explained what's happening as I'm throwing things into this flour. I did have one student's mom take her outside later and recreate the experiment, like dropping things in the dirt outside their home, so that she could feel the holes in the spray that was made. She's a student that is a tactile learner. Unfortunately, they tried to video that so we could use it for our submission, and that file just got, as it happens, got corrupted or whatever, so we couldn't use it. So that was their exploration of how craters are made. We have a giant picture of an atom. Oh, we did search for building blocks of life. And this year we had kind of a cool game that we played, which was the carbon game. And it was dice based. So you rolled a die and it told you to go somewhere on a list based on the number. And you were that kind of carbon atom. And so we did one time around, and we went from fossil fuel to fossil fuel to fossil fuel to fossil fuel to the atmosphere, to plants, to the atmosphere, to the surface of the ocean, and we ended up in the deep ocean. So the idea of that activity is so students can see how carbon is in everything. And it's part of that idea of searching for life and how carbon is part of life. And then they did it a second time because they wanted to see if it would show up the same. So that was their extension of their experiment. And I made the lesson a little more accessible and virtual by adding emojis for each station they stopped at, when originally it was supposed to be a colored bead or something like that that the kids collected. So we have oil barrels and clouds and trees and ocean and a whale. And, you know, the screen reader would pick up the name of the emoji. So the kids liked that. Then we did our methane detector. We didn't get to actually use the CO2 detector this year because of life. And our methane experiment, the kids were on campus, but I was still virtual. So the video is shot via Zoom, and one of the students running around the video on Zoom, or running around with his iPad on Zoom, filming his friends with the methane detector. So let's check. This is, they love this experiment of the year always. Search for
Also,
life.
to kind of point upwards.
There you go. Yep.
And can you find the on button on the front of it?
Down a little bit lower.
So right now, the student is trying to learn how to turn on.
That's not gonna hurt anything, Dave.
Yeah, but it screeches.
It does screech. There you go.
Okay.
Leave it on. Okay.
It's okay.
You're gonna go
Listen
into
to
the
Now, how do we know if it's detecting gases?
Because it's going to screech. No, because it will spike up.
Yep. Okay, so head into the bathroom there, Bridget Dawn.
Let's check this out. This is very interesting. We'll help you, okay?
All right, Desmond, you're doing a good job filming.
It is. He's doing a great job.
No. Then there's on the other side here, there's the toilet. To your right.
He's gonna have to listen, see if it spikes.
Okay, so that one's a little long. We won't go through it. But, and it is linked in the thing I sent you. They wandered all around campus playing with the sensor. And it was, I don't know, it's a lot of fun. And then they debrief at the end to figure out what gas was there and why and how. Then they get to design their own mission patch, just like NASA missions do. So this year we have a beaker, and across the bottom it says WSSB and Explorers in print, and then also in SimBraille. Going up the neck of the beaker, we have Roads on Asteroids 2021, which was the name of the mission, and then again in Braille. And then we have to build our map this year. They didn't give us the map, you had to build the map. And I enlisted some of my high schoolers that became our cartography team to build the map, and everything still had to be socially distanced. So we split the map up into foot by foot squares, and they had to deconstruct the coordinates to then draw the portion of the circle or shape that they needed to make for the 3 craters, as well as points and landing points. And I have lots and lots of pictures of this process happening. I have a student who made a mini map. We've got a 4-cell here. We've got taping it down. I have a totally blind student who used tactile stickers, you know, the dots and X's and O's from EPIQ, to mark where different samples and where the center point of circles would be on specific grids for the coordinates. So other students could then they would know the center of their circle, and they could find the radius and then make the full larger circle. Then we have our map in construction, and it is just a grid that they broke down and taped together. Various levels of teamwork. We have a student cutting foam to make ramps, because we had to make 2 ramps that would go in and out of the craters, because of the snowman crater is 3 craters that are stacked very similar to what a snowman would look like. So we had height requirements to be a certain height tall and a certain distance out. So they're attempting to make these, and we're all masked and we're all distanced, which made it all very interesting to try and build teamwork. And then we have a video clip of attempting to go over a ramp with our little MBot robot. And it was a lovely fail. And well, it rolls off the side of the ramp about halfway up. We could not fly a drone in my classroom this year. Last year, we did fly drones in the library and landed one on a student's head, not entirely on purpose. So instead of using a drone, we used what we could think of. Oh, my picture's not in here. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I have a small picture up here. That is a rope, a roll of duct tape, and a toilet paper roll. And we had rope strung from 2 students holding the rope with the duct tape on it. That would be the flying across the room to impact a little Lego piece on top of a chair that would then drop into the map. And then they had to go across the other direction and have the duct tape land on top of the robot. And we used the block language for the MBot for our code of our actual robot. So I have a screenshot of that. And then I made tactile maps of everything for students. And our final mission video to end it all out. This was their submission. They did not complete all of the missions, but they did their darn tootin' best. And it's buffering, so eventually it'll play. So we've got students with the
Nice. Okay. So hold your arm down a little bit. There you go.
And they had to do
Keep
this
wiggling,
all
Des.
in one shot. We couldn't
Okay. Now
stop
come
and try
across so
again.
that you
Well,
can land it
stop
on the
and try
robot.
again, but you had to start over. So the
Okay,
roll
so
of duct
Courtney,
tape
hold your arm up.
across the bottom of the map. At the
Courtney,
moment,
you gotta be
held
tall
on by
now.
a
Stand up.
string.
Excellent. Des, you gotta be shorter. And Courtney, you can come to him.
And so they're
There you
attempting
go.
to not
You
touch
can hold
the
the rope
duct tape
closer. Hold it
roll
up here.
or the robot and have the duct tape roll
Nope,
land on
don't
the
touch
robot.
it. Leave it be. Okay, come down a little bit, Courtney. There we go. Almost. Almost, Des.
Both of these
Back it up
students
a little
do
bit.
have some vision, and we're not the original
Almost.
2 planned to do the video, but somebody had to go home early. So we had to fill in and make do. We're attempting, almost cheating to
Don't
get
touch
this
it. Don't touch it. Excellent.
put
All
on
right,
the
let go
robot.
of your let go of your rope, Courtney. Let go of it. Just let it down. We go to the ground.
Excellent.
Excellent.
We ran this like 10 times before we
Pull
finally
that
got
through.
this shot. So it was an afternoon.
Nice job. Okay, Courtney. You're gonna start the robot.
That's a funny way to set it. Right. Right.
There you go.
So the robot has an
See?
arm that just lowered.
We got the
and it's
sample.
picking up a sample, and it's headed to the ramp,
Oh no!
and it crashed off the ramp. And that was as far as they made it. They did not complete the whole challenge, but they did the best that they could, and I was super stinking proud of them. We met for a half hour at a time. The beginning of the year, it was 3 times a week. After March, it was 4 times a week, half hour at a time. So that was the competition my kids did. And I haven't heard how we did yet. We haven't gotten our results back.
That looks awesome. Is this the one where you can choose what type of robot you use, or is that assigned
Yes,
to you?
you can choose the robot. We could have used an EV3. I didn't. The M-Bot, I got a whole bunch from Donors Choose for one, is I think easier to assemble than a Lego robot is, because it's more concrete. You don't have to go search for pieces that are the right size. It's all very nuts and bolts and a screwdriver, and all right there. So the kids, actually, I had enough robots that they each built one on their own and then used one of them for their final trek around. So
yeah, so we've traditionally done Lego, but if you're, I mean, you were going over a barrier and then picking things up, you could also do that with Dash or Q from Wonder Workshop. And then there is that
never used a
accessible,
Dash, so
that accessible app. So
yeah, they had come to our school. They had come to our school once to show us the Blocks for All, but I haven't used it since then. Like, that was way early days of it.
Yeah, well, and I think there's some glitches, but I'll double check. But maybe we could do that. I hate to leave Lego just because we can use Quorum.
Sure.
But who knows? And do you always use one robot?
It's always a one robot mission. Well, so they've run it 3 years, and in those 3 years, it's been a one robot mission.
Okay.
For Blocks for All too, I know Lauren has been doing a lot of work to improve Blocks for All over time as well too. I don't know what she's working on now, but my recollection is that she got some recent funding to try to expand on it as well. And my hunch is, even when we develop our block stuff on top of Quorum, although it'll be much broader because it's not just for the Dash robot, at the same time, my hunch is we'll take into account whatever they found on Blocks for All too in her research.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be awesome. Can you put me in touch with her, Stefik? Because I tried to write to her and maybe I got swallowed in cyberspace. It took me like a year, almost 2 years for me to actually correspond with Stefik too.
That's really fun. I know my email is a big giant black hole. I've now got a Gina filter, but literally at this second right now, I think I've got 500 emails in my box. So like, 501, I'm sorry. So
so I put the website.
I can put you in touch with her. I don't know Lauren super well, but she was Richard Ladner's graduate student. So I've known her for a few years. So, and she's extremely nice. So I'm sure
she's a lovely person. I mean,
yeah.
Cool.
If I recall correctly, it's also possible she might not have responded because she had a baby not that long ago. So she may have been a little busy for some reason. I can't figure out why. So she's been pretty swamped, but I'll put you in touch with her. So.
Okay. Yeah, Wonder Workshop is on board, so that's kind of nice. Like, they're the opposite of what we're experiencing with Lego. Nice. So it's sort of like, let's lift up those companies and competitions that are embracing diversity, and maybe it will peer pressure the others to realize that it's possible and to jump in.
So I threw the link to Nesby to Slack. Please give some allowance to the team. Their head, the lead of the entire team, Robert Wigley, died right before Christmas, and he has been running that entire. He was their NASA liaison. He's mentioned on the NASA site as condolences there too, right? And they've just really, it's a very, very small team. I think it's people that run this whole organization for the competitions. And their site's a little wonky right now. They've not done a great job of updating it since he left. But they're a great crew. I love them.
All right. Well,
highly recommend. Yep, we're over. I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine. That's not a problem at all. I always like it when people have questions. So I was actually going to say, is there any final question? Maybe there's one more, Max, or something.
I wanted to show one thing real quick, just for, I'll
Gina,
try to
this
hold it up.
wasn't your talk.
I know, but you guys brought up Codequest. So here's the 3D printed manipulatives for doing the blocks.
Maybe I
So
should actually
it's-
print those for next year.
You totally should. I love 3D printed things. 'cause
Mike,
you
print
can
those for
clean
me,
them.
will you?
Um,
You're sitting there.
So they got the orientation slant, and if kids really have trouble with directions, this is a great way to get them started. And then there's like the astronaut and the alien and the rocket ship. So I haven't met anyone who doesn't like having these yet. So it just helps with the concepts and reinforces everything that Amanda said, which was awesome.
All right, well then let's thank Amanda and Tim, or whatever you want to do. The next topic is actually William, who's going to be showing us the